Does anybody remember that movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray, where he wakes up and every day is the same day over and over again? Well, today that's exactly how I feel, because I haven't walked down this street in about 5 to 6 months, so it's been a very long time. But yet, as I was driving down here to do this video, I saw all the same listings still for sale and for rent. And I'm going to show you guys some of them in today's video, which is just astonishing to me that, you know, people can have places on the market for rent and for sale for 5-6 months plus, probably longer than that for some of them, and just let it just sit there languish on the market and not actually sell or move these properties. Guys, it is just unbelievable to see this to me. Like, I just can't understand the mentality. So even though today's video is not about that, I definitely wanted to share with you that you're going to see some really old listings that I've shown here on the channel before that are still available. In fact, here's the first one right here. Now, this first listing here is so much worse than I even thought it was. It's a rental. It's currently listed for $10,000 per month, okay? And it's not a flip or anything like that. They bought it back in 1998 for only $280,000, so good for them. But here's where things take a turn for the worse. This house has been listed for rent since January of 2023. Original listing price, 15 grand. They have cut the price 50% on this rental. It has been sitting here empty for a year. No one is renting it. That is crazy. Absolutely insane, guys. Whoever owns this house should sell this house ASAP, because they are just bleeding money, especially when you see this property tax bill of almost $25,000 a year now that it jumped up like 4 times now that the house is empty and it's not a homesteaded property anymore. This house is literally bleeding cash. Because you have home sellers out there who are starting to lose money on the sales of their homes and are now selling them for less than they paid for. And guess what, guys? The average seller that's losing money right now is losing a median of $30,000 on each sale. Can you imagine losing 30 grand on the sale of a property right now? And thanks DJ for sending me this story, because this is a big deal, guys. In fact, 2.38% of Tampa Bay homes sold at a loss from August through October of 2023, which is up from about 1% from a year ago, which means even a year ago, these homes were still selling at a loss back then, but now the losses are starting to mount. They're saying, hey, let's look at the bright side of this, which is that, well, the losses are actually $9,000 less than last year. So even though more people are losing money, the amount of losses aren't as bad. Oh, that softens the blow. That would make me feel a whole lot better as a seller who is losing 30 grand on a sale right now. But guess what? It's not just in Tampa, guys. In fact, this is something that's starting to happen in different areas across the country. The highest share of losses were in San Francisco. Surprise, surprise, people losing money on the sales of their property, where the median loss on a home sale there was $122,500. Think about that. People losing over 100K, over 120K on a home sale. That's more than most people make per year. Just let that sink in for a moment. And once again, this is not happening everywhere, but we're starting to see things like this pop up in different areas across the country. These are the only 2 places that this story names, but I'd be willing to bet that in other places, especially like in Austin, Texas, for example, people are selling at a loss. Boise, Idaho, people are selling at a loss. Certain markets in Arizona, now here in Florida. Where's next, guys? So many people think that this just can't happen to them, or it can't happen where they live, and that is just flat out not true. In fact, Zillow even came out with some predictions recently that are kind of interesting. Now, I normally don't give any weight to a lot of this stuff. It's just interesting to discuss and talk about. And usually their predictions that sound kind of crazy, but actually their predictions that they just came out with sound reasonable for once. They're actually saying that by next year that affordability should improve a little bit for home buyers due to the fact that we're likely to see home prices come down a little bit, along with interest rates come down a little bit. Because one thing that they're predicting that's going to happen is that a lot of people have been on the sidelines not wanting to sell their homes because of these high interest rates. Well, they're thinking that by this time next year, we're still going to have high rates. We're still going to have rates that are probably close to 7%, 6.5%. That's what's being predicted right now. And these people that have been holding out on selling the property, thinking that rates are going to drop back down to 3%, are finally going to get the wake-up call and realize that, you know what, we're not going to hang on to these properties anymore because the interest rates are not falling as fast as we want them to, and we need to move on with our lives, so we're going to sell this house. So they're predicting that a lot of people next year are finally going to cave in and give up those 3% interest rates that have been hanging on to these properties and wanting to move for one reason or another. And that's a very interesting prediction for a couple of reasons, because number one, these people just bought, you know? People that have a 3% interest rate now just bought within the last few years, and for so many of them to be desperate to sell right now is a big red flag, right? It's kind of weird that so many people want to get out of these houses. And the other thing is, that's a far shorter holding period than what's being suggested right now. They're saying the average homeowner now hangs on to their house between 10 to 13 years, which is much higher than the 7 or 8 years that it used to be, but yet these people want to get out within 3 to 4 years. Here's another fun little story with this house. It's a rental for $19,700 a month, and it actually started off as a rental back in 2022. And that shows you how much the rental market has flipped as well, because they rented it back in 2022 just a year ago for $21,000 in December, and now they can't even get it rented for $19,700. And then they ended up listing it for sale for a whopping $3.75 million, lowered the price $400K until taking it off the market, and then decided it was a good idea to list it for rent again at $23,000 a month. And now the house is continually sitting empty with price reduction after price reduction on the rent. No one is renting this place, and the property tax bill here is a whopping $24,000 a year. Another empty house just bleeding cash in Miami Beach. Unbelievable. So we have this house right behind me that's been for sale for at least a year, probably longer. I'll let you guys know. And then right across the street, this was just an empty lot last time I was here. And look at that. Huge mansion being built up here right now. That's what all these houses are going to end up being eventually, I think. It's going to be turned into these just giant mansions on these relatively small lots for the size of this house. So here's what Zillow's predicting these people are going to do. They're saying that many of these homeowners will have their eye on a home with a bigger or no backyard, an extra or fewer bedrooms, or in their preferred neighborhood across town. And Zillow predicts more of these homeowners will end their holdout for lower rates and go ahead with these moves. That's part of their 2024 housing market prediction. That's a very interesting prediction. I wouldn't even go as far to say that. I don't think a lot of people are going to do that. But who knows, guys? It really depends on how much buyer's remorse these people have, right? Because if you have a lot of people that bought houses that are further away from work than they anticipated, or, you know, it's just too much maintenance to handle, but they thought they were getting a good deal on it. Maybe it's becoming no longer affordable with rising taxes and inflation and insurance. Who knows? But that is a very interesting prediction for them to come out and say that all these people are going to sell these houses. Here's another one that thinks they can double their money in 3 years, listed at $2.15 million, and they bought it back in 2020 for $995. And now that Redfin is hiding listing data, we have to turn to the trusty MLS to see what's really going on here. They have listed this house on and off. That's their tactic. List it, take it off the market after 60 days if it doesn't sell, with massive price reductions, because they at one point were asking $3.15 million for this house. So they have knocked literally $1 million off the asking price since earlier this year. And they've also been trying to rent it for 20 grand. That's not happening either. But supposedly they live in the house. It's a homesteaded property, and the property tax bill is barely 15 grand a year. Now they're saying that because we're going to have more homes on the market next year, but it's still going to be unaffordable for the vast majority, this is going to actually help relieve pricing problems that we have right now. And they're expecting that home prices overall next year will fall by 0.2%, which is practically nothing, guys. We're just talking about keeping home prices flat here with a prediction like that. And literally earlier this year, they were predicting that home prices were going to jump 6.5% between July 2023 and July 2024. How about a turnaround there, huh? they're going from a 6.5% gain to now a 0.2% loss. And I remember picking on this prediction when I was in California making a video about this. Like, you guys must be on crack, because there's no way the housing market's going to go up by that much next year, and they're starting to realize that finally for themselves. And you know, a few of you brought this to my attention over time, and that is, if home prices remain flat but inflation is still running at, say, 3 or 4%, then you're actually losing value on your home through inflation. And it's an interesting way to look at it, because typically before this crazy phenomenon in the housing market, housing would roughly rise each year with inflation. You know, it was normal to see anywhere between 3 to 5% appreciation in the housing market per year, and that was enough to keep up with or beat inflation. But now, if home prices start to remain flat, even if they don't go down, which they are going down in a lot of different places right now, but even if they were to remain flat on a median nationwide scale, then you're essentially still losing money to inflation. Think about that one. And Zillow's line of thought here is that even though we're going to see more inventory next year, a lot of these home buyers are going to be sidelined because it's still going to be too expensive. And this is actually going to push the rental prices for single family home rentals higher as more and more families look to rent houses instead of buy them. But if you can avoid having a house for a couple years and rent a multifamily property, that will be able to save you even more money, because that is the #1 type of property being delivered to the rental market right now. And we are already seeing rental vacancies on the rise right now, and you're starting to see landlords offer better and better discounts, better and better deals, and offering anywhere between 1 to 3 months free to lease a place right now, guys. And we only have seen about 35% of the rentals under construction right now hit the market. So, and they're already doing these massive incentives and price reductions just like the home builders. I too think that even if prices remain flat and interest rates come down next year, you're not going to see a bunch of people pile back into the market like it's being reported, and people like Barbara Corcoran are saying this is going to happen. People still won't be able to afford it. #1, renting is looking like a much more attractive option now that it is far cheaper than owning a house basically everywhere. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps out more than you think, and it's a great way to just show your appreciation for these videos. Now, Zillow thinks inventory is going to go up because people that have been waiting for rates to drop are going to see rates aren't dropping and decide to sell anyways, which is an interesting theory. But I think that inventory is going to go up for a different reason. I think because the economy is not doing that well like they're saying it is, and more people continue to lose jobs, that people are going to have to sell because the cost of carrying these houses is too high. And people have been trying to hold out, but they're starting to give in already, because we're starting to see inventory go up at the time of year when it always goes down. And so we're going to see all this inventory we have right now combined with the usual inventory that we see in the springtime. And when we start seeing that, that's when you're going to see a noticeable uptick in the amount of listings on the US housing market, because it's not normal for inventory to be going up in December, guys. It's not normal at all, but yet that's what we're seeing happen. And you guys can see all these listings we just looked at here in my neighborhood, are languishing on the market for God knows how long, okay? You have these houses sitting on the market, and then when spring rolls around, you're gonna have even more homes hit the market from people who are already thinking about selling and gonna list their home anyways. But now they have the competition of the homes that didn't sell from the year before. So we're going to start seeing houses pile up, I think. Homes that are $250,000 or $300,000 or less, those houses still might fly off the market because that's within the realm of affordability for the average home buyer. But anything higher than that is likely to be sitting for quite some time. Now, Steve sent me this interesting story about electric cars and how Consumer Reports just did an article about electric cars, and They say, this is not coming from me guys, this is from magazine Consumer Reports, that US owners of electric vehicles have been experiencing on average more problems with their cars than owners of vehicles with a traditional internal combustion engine. Their most recent article named that Lexus, Toyota, and Mini are the 3 most reliable brands in Consumer Reports auto reliability ranking. And after reviewing all these electric cars, they had to add 3 new trouble areas to their car reports, which are electric motor, EV hybrid battery, and EV charging. So they're ranking these things now on how good or bad it is. So some interesting findings from this is that out of the 20 trouble areas that Consumer Reports tracks, hybrids actually on average have 26% fewer problems than gas vehicles. So they seem to be the most reliable form of a car, which is a hybrid with electric and gas motor. However, EVs have 79% more problems than gasoline vehicles, and plug-in hybrids are the worst with 146 more problems than gas vehicles. So the plug-in hybrids are the ones that you have to charge the battery, and the normal hybrids are the ones that you never have to charge anything. You just put gas in it like a normal car, but it has an electric motor that substitutes with the gas motor all on its own. And they're saying the most common problems that they're seeing with these electric cars are EV drive system motors and EV charging systems and the EV batteries. And apparently the worst electric cars to own are the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Mustang Mach-E, the Genesis GV60, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Kia Niro EV and EV6, the Subaru Solterra, the Toyota BZ4X, and the Volkswagen ID4 all reported these issues. So if you're thinking about buying an electric car, obviously you want to steer clear of these models. And notice how you didn't see Tesla on there, which could be part of the reason why Tesla does so well. You know, I'm not sitting here advocating anybody to buy a Tesla. I'm just saying that they weren't on the list for all these problems. But that doesn't mean Teslas don't have their problems. It just means they're not the worst of the electric vehicles that you can buy. But auto dealers are starting to fight back against this, because by 2032, the United States wants to have 2/3 of all vehicles sold be fully electric. And all these auto dealers are saying, wait a minute, this is not going to be possible because nobody wants to buy these cars. You know, they're having these cars sitting there pile up on the dealership lots right now because people don't want them. And also people can't afford them because there's also a big gap between the cost of an electric car versus a gas car. And since these cars are pretty much piling up on the dealer lots, they're saying, wait a minute, we're not going to be able to make this transition as fast as you guys are saying that we're going to. And this is something I've been saying here on the channel, which is why I'm bringing this up, because I said this like a year ago and so many people were like, you know, poo-pooing me over this. Like now even the car dealerships are on board with what I'm saying, guys, that I'm not against electric cars, I'm just against too fast of a transition. You know, you got people out there saying, oh, we have to make the change sometime, otherwise it's never gonna happen, which I get that. But at the same time, you can't move too fast with something like this and force people to buy cars that they don't want. And time again, what I have said about this that makes the most sense, like, let the market decide. You know, build a superior car, and if you do, then people will choose to buy that car. You're not going to have to force anyone to buy it. People are going to want to buy it, you know? But clearly these cars still have a lot of work to do in terms of catching up to reliability. And we know that the range is not there. I'm sure a lot of you guys have maybe seen some of the Cybertruck videos. I watched a couple of them yesterday, and okay, great guys, it's a $100,000 truck. First of all, who can afford that? Not many people, right? That's for the high-end model. And then, even at the high-end model, the furthest range that that truck has is 300 miles, guys. My Jeep can drive double that distance on one tank of gas. And think about that. I don't have to stop and charge it either. And I keep making this point because I have driven across the country a couple of times, and when you drive super long distances like that, saving every little bit of time makes a huge difference. And sitting there trying to stop and charge the car every 250 miles or so would not be conducive to saving any time at all. In fact, that probably would have added extra days to my road trip, as if it already didn't take long enough. So clearly these are not full-on replacement for gas-powered cars yet. At least I don't think that they are. Is it a good alternative for people that can charge their cars at home and don't have long commutes to take with the car and don't have to do cross-country road trips? Yeah, I think so. if you can afford one. But this is still not something that can be just pushed on the masses quite yet. So somebody the other day asked me what's happening with Citizens Insurance, because the Senate recently was probing into Citizens Insurance, asking about the potential for Citizens Insurance to ask for a huge bailout if there was a catastrophic hurricane here in Florida, and Citizens Insurance essentially ran out of money. So the Senate's concern is a big storm hits Florida, Citizens Insurance completely runs out of money, and then they go crying to the federal government for a bailout, which essentially means all taxpayers will be paying for that bailout, which they seem to have no problem with any sorts of bailouts these days. But I'm not saying that they should bail out Citizens if this happens. But Citizens says that, listen, as Florida's insurer of last resort, Citizens is structured so that it will always be able to protect its policyholders and pay claims. If Citizens were to pay out all reserves and reinsurance following a major storm or series of disasters, it is required by Florida law to levy surcharges and assessments on its policyholders and on all Florida insurance consumers until any deficit is eliminated. As such, Citizens will always have the ability to pay claims. So essentially what this says is that if something like this were to happen, the worst case scenario, and Citizens completely ran out of money, then all of the people who live in Florida are going to be on the hook for bailing out Citizens. Like, if you have any type of insurance policy here in Florida, they will charge you extra on those policies. They have the full legal right to do so until that deficit is met. Okay, so it won't be something that lands on all the taxpayers across the country, but it will be something that lands on anybody who has an insurance policy here in Florida. But there is some good news at the end of the tunnel with this, because recently Citizens was able to shed an additional 90,000 policies, because their policies have been growing at an alarming rate over the past few years because of so many insurance companies closing and dropping Florida coverage altogether, and people have had no choice but to get Citizens. As of this Friday, Citizens had 1,255,000 policies, and that's down from 1,344,000 policies just a week ago, which is the lowest total that they've had since April of 2023. The high point that Citizens reached was actually 1.4 million policies. So they've been able to shed at least 150,000 policies recently, which is called depopulation. So even more policies are scheduled to be depopulated in December and in January. So this is a pretty good sign that the insurance market down here in Florida is finally starting to heal. Is it better now? Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But this is at least a step in the right direction, I think, for things. So it looks like a lot of these companies are finally offering somewhat competitive rates when it comes to what Citizens was offering before, because they have this law now where if the insurance that's being offered to you is within 20% of the cost of Citizens, you have to take it. And apparently this has been happening for a lot of different people lately. But just so you know, guys, if you live in Florida, okay, and there is this major storm that they're talking about that costs hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in damage, and Citizens goes bankrupt, they're not actually going to be bankrupt. They're going to come after you to pay for it. Even if you live in Ocala or Orlando, somewhere inland, and you didn't get any damage from the storm, and you only pay us a low homeowner's insurance premium, that will get jacked up if Citizens runs out of money. So just keep that in mind, because I get people that write me on the channel and say, oh, my insurance is still only $1,700 a year, in the middle of nowhere, Florida. Well, good for you, but that might not be the case if Citizens is required to assess people for losses. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.